if it works.
Heads up, is everyone okay if I record this call?
Yes.
So Phil and I kind of sketched out a rough agenda that we'll go over. I can I'll post the link to that in the chat, maybe, in case not everybody got it. Let's see. Phil and I have been using this Skiff app that's pretty interesting. It's almost like Google Docs, but everything's end-to-end encrypted, at least as much as it can be. I'm still kind of going through their encryption schemes to see how they do it, but it seems pretty cool. Yeah, so I think everybody knows me, but I'm Keith, and working on the software for Republic, but also the organization built around it, which I think I'm going to kind of cover why those two things are important, both for myself and everybody else. But maybe Phil, you want to introduce yourself and maybe hand it off to somebody else afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll go next. So I guess, yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Phil. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. I'm like a data geek, I guess. I'm tired of having big tech making profits out of my personal data. I think that we should all have control over it and have the possibility to monetize it if we want to share it. So that's what brought me into the space. That's how I met Keith. And yeah, working full-time on this space now. I work for Pooled Data. They provide infrastructure for data unions, so for building organizations like Republic. And yeah, I help out Keith at Republic I do a bit of everything. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I'll pass the mic to Corey.
Hi folks, Corey. I'm in Eugene, Oregon. I am a part of Keith's family, and I've been hearing about this idea for years now, and really excited to help in whatever way I can. I'll pass it off to John.
Hey, I'm John. I'm in Austin, Texas. Met Keith and Eric through in Denver at DAO Planet, and then have just followed along through Journo DAO, and spoke with both of them just online and offline, just about various projects and topics in this space. And yeah, man, I'm down for whatever you guys are doing.
And John, it would be good for you to kind of ask the preliminary questions for people who might be listening to this later. I think the people here are probably a little familiar with the project, but I realize people will be listening to this recorded later on. So feel free to jump in if I've just like skipped ahead on something you think would be good for us to back up.
Oh, you know I will. I'll always be like, what are you talking about? I'm pretty good about that.
That's awesome. Okay. Eric, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. Like John said, I know these guys through the web of DAOs, and Keith and I are co-founders of Journo DAO as well. Keith being promiscuous with DAOs at this point. And so a big part of Journo DAO is kind of trying to give journalists a little bit more independence and autonomy. And so it just seems like a no-brainer that what Republic is working on is in the same vein and complementary. I think that's it. I'm in Taos, New Mexico.
Cool.
Oh, and I'll send it to who have we not heard from? Emery?
Yeah, so my name is Emre. Can you guys hear me? Because I can't see my voice. Okay, cool. So I'm based in Europe. I'm working at Data Union DAO, which has a decentralized backend infrastructure for data unions. It's live on Gnosis and Streamer Network, and Streamer is like a peer-to-peer data streaming network, and they created the Data Unions framework, I think 2019, and the DAO is a spin-off from Streamer. I work in socials and community building, and when I saw that there's some contributions happening at Republic, I was really excited to see, because I think there's huge potential for Republic, and it just needs some more love and different opinions and different people contributing. So I'm just trying to help and move this forward.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, and then Daniel, I think you're last, or maybe Mary.
Yeah. So Mary is my mom. Mom, do you want to go and then pass it off to Deanne?
Yeah, I'm Mary, and I live in Eugene, Oregon, and obviously I've connected to this through Keith, and got to go to the Denver East Denver in February. Had my first experience of learning what crypto 101, and I've been continuing. I'm not even to 102 yet, and until this morning I was writing DAO as DOA and realized that is not and so I'm a little I'm a new learner, and have connected to, and I just want to say I shouldn't be the only female on this call, but anyway, that's how I came in. I bought my first stock ever at the age of 69, and I now am the proud owner of some Ethereum stock, but I don't have one whole ETH yet. So I bought it in increments, and that should tell you something. A little cautious, but I'm a lifelong learner and want to hear everything about the personal. I know that people in my age group are just oblivious, and they've been having their personal information shared and sold over and over and over and don't even realize it. So I guess that would be my hope, is that I find a way that I can talk about, to present to my generation, my elders, that they don't have to do that, that we have a right to that personal data. So that's where I'm coming from. So Daniel, it's up to you.
Hello. Thanks, Mary. I'm Daniel. I'm in Northern California, Sebastopol, California, and I've been following Keith's work in this space for a number of years. A longtime friend of Keith's, and in a previous life years ago, I did some academic research on liquid democracy algorithms, and so I'm part of my interest is seeing what this project, how it touches on liquid democracy and just the evolution of liquid democracy in the Web3 space in general, and governance is of interest to me. And so I'm an interested observer today. Thanks. Pass it back to you, Keith.
All right, awesome. Really stoked to have everybody here. Thanks for those of you who are here because of a personal connection. I appreciate your faith in me as we go on, but hopefully it materializes into something that draws everybody in, because I think it's just going to get more and more important from here on out. And so I just kind of want to talk about the organization of Republic versus like the software as like a initial orientation, and because it's something that I'm kind of always trying to articulate in my own head. And I just think that if the goal is to build like a global data utility where everybody feels comfortable, participating in it and using it, then it would have to be something that's owned and operated by the people who use it, so that everyone feels like they have agency in deciding, what tools are built, how they're used. And so that it took me a while to realize that just necessitates some sort of governance mechanism built in, even before I got into Web3 and crypto and DAOs, and before this kind of DAOs are experiencing this urgency kind of across the board as far as needing governance. And what they've done before is to have a token that if you buy it, then you get a say in what the DAO does. And now we're seeing that that financialization of the governance creates all these weird incentives and kind of doesn't actually express the will of the people that you want to reach or your community. It just kind of opens you up to other people coming in and taking over your organization. So, and Dan and I were talking about this in his liquid democracy concept. And so that's kind of the Republic voting app will be how this DAO and hopefully like other DAOs just decide on what software is built, how it's built, how people are compensated, like who's hired to work on the software, and a bunch of stuff like that. And so we'll get into how that works later, but that's kind of why Republic has the mobile app right now, which is software that just collects your data for you, encrypts it, and stores it for you at this point, and then also allows you to share it on the Streamer data unions for compensation. And yeah, I'll talk about liquid democracy when we get to the actual app that I've built so far that we can kind of check out. And you all will be people who contribute to the DAO in any way will be invited into like the voting governance process. So we'll kind of go over how that works later. So we have the data collection software, and then which is just the mobile app right now. And then you can share it on Streamer for data tokens if you want through the app. You don't have to. And the plan is to build in more sharing options as they become available and as they're kind of vetted by the community. So Streamer is one outlet now, but as Emery kind of knows, there's with the data union DAO and like pool data that Phil's working at, there's potentially lots of different outlets for your data that Republic collects. And we're kind of hoping to be plug and play with anything that any of us might want to use. I think is a good litmus test. If there's anything that the community wants their data to play with, then Republic should kind of implement it and find a way for people to use that. And so where it's at right now is there's just the mobile app. Well, first of all, any questions so far, or did I jump any sort of basic concepts there? No. And so like at a high level, you can just think of as you go throughout your day, you're kind of giving off this stream of data from like your movements and behaviors and what you write, what you interact with, like emails, what you decide to eat, where you go, all this stuff is slowly kind of being digitized by a bunch of companies that don't really care about you or what you would want to do with all that data. And so Republic's goal is to just kind of put a bubble around you that collects all that stuff for you, and then it can only get out to different people on your terms and in ways that you want. So that's kind of how I look at it. And then stuff like JournoDAO or some of the science applications are kind of like, journalism is kind of like a refined version of that data, where you're collecting all this stuff and you're processing it in a certain way, and then you're putting it out there in the world, and then it's of high value because you've like processed it in a certain way. But that's really kind of anything that you do. It's not just like journalism. There's like all these other things that we consider like professions now that you could reframe as like different ways to process, the information that you come across each day. So I feel like in the future we're going to finally have a way to we're all going to be a little bit scientists, a little bit journalists, a little bit of writers, artists, all these things that we've kind of siloed into like these professions and roles and identities. I think collecting the data in this way is going to show us that we actually have a lot to contribute in all these different areas. And we're just kind of, it's not a way that we interact with the world, but those people who think that, what we do is art, or what we do is journalism, or what we do is science, they're going to be able to find us just by us making our data available in different ways. And so, and along those lines, I think Corey and I have been talking about the environmental nature of Republic, and how data ownership is kind of, in the environmental world, they're slowly coming into data ownership as like a solution that is being recognized as being necessary to do anything meaningful about climate change, and having like decentralized data distribution and all that. But a lot of people in that space are trying to come at it from like a top down, like, okay, let's, get this piece of equipment and then deploy it all across the globe, and then we'll like be able to monitor things. And I think it's much more efficient for, everybody to have a stake in helping that effort and being able to be rewarded for it. And in that way, you just get people buying up their own equipment, setting it up themselves, and then, contributing to this larger effort and then being compensated for it. And so that's like definitely an end state that I want Republic to support. And so I think right now the website says get paid for your data, but that was under the premise of like reaching out to passive income people who I thought would be the first users. And that was before really I understood like all the refi and DeSci stuff going on in the space. And I think we have a really strong story there to tell. So if that's just kind of like where we're headed for the rest of the year, I think Phil and I have talked about updates to the website as far as like hitting on different points and different words like data dignity, and moving away from the kind of get paid for your data. I think that'll always be there, but I don't think that's like the most compelling thing right now. And it actually kind of it's kind of a side quest to, I think, like the main stuff that like we're all interested in solving. Phil, anything to add to that? Or
Yeah, I think the strategy behind like adapting our messaging is to attract maybe a crowd that resonates, or that maybe that's closer to our ethos or philosophy. I think the getting paid is, as you mentioned, Keith, is one of the elements of having control of your data. But I think we might be more interested in attracting folks who are there maybe for the mission more than for the passive income at first, especially.
yeah, because when we announced our Discord and like the streamer Discord, we did get like a lot of people coming over, but there were quite a few people who were just kind of concerned about accumulating the data token. And so, but things only really got traction when like Phil showed up and actually started doing things. And it's Phil and I have talked about, like, we just need more people like Phil to come. Like if we had one or two more Phils, then like we would have some momentum in a way that, like, you know, 100 like passive kind of observers just hasn't really taken off.
I'm glad. I just want to also add. I'm glad that Emre. I'm glad you showed up in our Discord and mentioned that you have some interest in contributing. I'm really excited to have you on board also, Emre. That's really nice. Plus, I think we can leverage our knowledge. We're both working for two organizations that kind of offer similar services. So I find it great to have both of us here at the same place.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to work together on this.
So do you think we're ready to talk about the voting app, or should we talk about more of the mobile app and vision?
I think everyone, I don't know, does anyone have any questions for the mobile app? I think maybe we could keep on doing more of the like overview stuff, and after we've done the overview for like both products, we can jump into more of prioritizing on what we have to do next. But Eric, I see you have your mic off. Do you have anything to add?
I just adding on to what about kind of like the messaging while you guys were talking, it kind of made me think of like back to the early days of Google before they took over everything. And then when they, you know, one of their early mottos was that their goal was to organize the world's information. And like, I think they actually did that. But then they like kept it all for themselves and and kept as much profit as possible. And like, I just think of it, and I'm trying to think of like, you know, I think Republic is, you know, like you said, it's more organic and like bubbling up from the bottom and more about, you know, data independence and autonomy. I was trying to think of, you know, an example of an organization that provides all this valuable data and has no ownership interest. And like the one that comes to mind is NASA, where everything NASA does is in the public domain. And like, as a result, like astronomy is actually a really remarkably easy field to get a hold of data for pretty much anything. And it's kind of essential. You know, if you spot like a meteor, you want to be able to share that information with a telescope on the other side of the world to verify it, and also because it's moving 20,000 miles an hour. You know, so it's like, that's an area where there's true free flow of data. And it's like, you know, so the messaging is kind of like, imagine if we had that free flow of data for everything, you know, climate and everything else. I just want to share that.
Yeah, that helps kind of, bring the vision into focus. And I think part of what I think is helpful and what I've noticed as far as like how we get there is, and what part Republic plays is, you can think of data almost as like any other commodity or resource, where you've got like the raw data that kind of starts at that conversion between like organic process meets like some sort of device or sensor. And then from there, it's kind of like raw or wholesale data, right? And that can just be like a bunch of confusing numbers, and it needs to be processed in some way. And so you kind of see this chain of like, there's like in a purchasing pipeline, at least, there would be like the wholesalers who are just kind of selling like the raw data coming off of devices. And then these layers start to emerge of all the people who process it. And so, and it's really similar to like paper processing or something, where it's like, it's not just one player who like takes the tree and then makes the paper or something. It kind of like gets funneled along to all these people. And most of those people are doing AI research in some ways when it comes to data. So it's like, you take the wholesale wholesaler, and then that goes through people who want to buy that. They want to feed that to their data models that they're training, usually. At least this is a common use case. And then, but there's a bunch of refinement that can go along the line. So then there's the next people who want to take the insights coming off of those models and then train additional models and and keep going. And then there's like consumers at each point along the way as well, until you get to, right now, I'd say like the most retail use case is like Walmart wants to know like what product you're going to buy when you walk into their store or something. And they don't really care about, I mean, right now they just collect all the data because they don't know what they're doing. But what they really want to know is actually very like targeted. And so there can be a bunch of other people who actually process that data and then just deliver the insight to Walmart. And Walmart doesn't have to be like the custodian of all this data and whatnot. And they don't have to really pay for all this infrastructure. Like they just want the insights at the end of the day that are like relevant to their business. I don't think most of these companies didn't set out to like create a giant surveillance network or whatever. They just wanted to know how to sell more stuff or whatever. So I think that's important to see, because then Republic is going to start at the wholesale side, because Republic, I think, should be like the closest to the user out of everybody, because that's where your kind of power starts from. And so first you want to try and capture everything first before anybody else does that you're generating, which is probably going to be impossible for a long time if it's ever possible. But you at least want to create like your own personal version of what everybody else is getting, so that you can kind of assert ownership over that stuff and be able to say like, hey, you're using this and I've proven that it's mine and that like I generated it over here because I have my own copy. And so that's kind of where Republic is starting. So like the mobile app is just trying to, read all the stuff that any app that you download can read from your device, but then create a copy of all that for you. And it doesn't do anything with that right now, but that's kind of like where we have to start, is just like building up that data set. And then so going forward, there's going to be, trying to get more and more types of data collected, but then also show you more about what it is, so that you can like get a grasp on it. Because even kind of dealing with the code and seeing the data coming across the wire and stuff, it's like, even I don't really see it gathered and displayed very often. And so when you see like Google sends you those like where you've been all year, like maps, and it's like, and that really hits home that you've been like surveilled for like the last year that you didn't even realize on a day-to-day basis. And I think, some more of those kind of visualizations are just ways for people to connect viscerally with what's actually going on. I think that'll help. It'll help me, just like this is something that I want, but I think it also kind of helps people see why they might need something like Republic in the first place. It's like, well, if all this stuff is getting out there anywhere, I feel like then I feel like, I should control it. It should be something that I have access to, instead of a bunch of people in server farms somewhere. So any questions, comments about that so far?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that, I mean, kind of unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, a big part of what we're going to have to do is just educating people to this. I mean, I can speak firsthand. I'm really ignorant about all this stuff, but The good thing is, I think you have a really compelling story to tell. So once we do that education, it's going to be pretty easy to move them and um, help motivate folks to want to create and see some change.
Yeah, one thing I might want to start doing with the community or just like public appearances is just have people say like anything that they're interested in, and then tie their interests back to data collection and how their life and their interests are like made worse by the current state of data transmission. Because it's just like you know, you can tie like how hard it is to be a musician back to the fact that there's a huge parasitic industry sitting between the fan and the musician that just consumes and monetizes data. And so I like how universal it is, but I also rely on you all to kind of guide the best places to like focus. And I mean, the like global warming and climate change and the crisis is personally like, I think it's getting more and more important to everybody. So I think that's like a good place to start. But like we could talk about literally anything, and I can like, you know, tie it back to this is probably like the root cause of whatever you're like upset about. And so we can talk about should we move on to voting or, oh, sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
I just want to touch on the education point again. It is because it is like an important aspect. I think we're all here together. We're all aware of the issue. Then like, but I think like if you never, basically if you have no idea about like if you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, you won't have much interest. But as soon as you kind of understand what's going on, it is because I mean like what's going on with personal data is like headline quality story. Like it is like, as Key and I have discussed before, it's like it's theft, and it's in my opinion like the biggest theft of the century. So I think there's something to think about. Maybe if we could like maybe include more educational content with Republic, or find a way to. I think it could actually be a good way for us to broaden our audience. Just simply like focusing the messaging on educating people. Maybe trying to find creative ways of doing like. I know there's like, what is it now? I think it's learn to earn, which is a big thing. So maybe that could be interesting for us too, because it's such a new space. Like I think like Jaron Lanier is probably one of the first one who was talking about it, and he's like started talking about the issue in 2013, and like it's like the first data unions like popped up like 2 years ago. There's still I don't know. There's still a lot of place for education. Just have to get creative.
Yeah, I really like the idea of like learn to earn like modules on like the app. Like just, you know, if you get the app and like you're kind of on board with the message, but you know, that's kind of as far as you've got. I think we can kind of work with people to like answer the most like top line questions and kind of guide people through like the years of kind of research and just learning about stuff that led us here.
Yeah, and I think Keith, you touched on a good point too, which is like you were talking about musicians. And I think many fields like have lost like income. I guess income have lost like either like career perspectives have been destroyed. Think about like translators. Like Jaron talks a lot about the translator example. Like you could make a living like by translating stuff before. Now like the amount of translators out there has just incredibly like declined, and then mostly because of Google Translate. And then the solution would be just like having like those translate, because all those AIs that Google has built for Google Translate is just going out there, scraping human translations, and then predicting, well, basically giving you suggestions of what that translation should be. And if we lived in a world where actually the humans who contribute to that algorithm were compensated, then they'd have dignity. That's where the term data dignity comes into play. So yeah, I think there's some quality content that could be made with that, because like we could touch pretty much like a ton of like fields and careers out there.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think also convincing people that something can be done, because I think I've heard a lot of people get upset, but it's like that's kind of like it's just kind of like the air we breathe. We can't really do anything about it. But I think like having Republic is, the closer it gets to like actually handing you something and like you can do something about this, like in the next 3 minutes or something, then I think that you can start to win those people over.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So does Republic intercept the data before it gets into the hands of the larger entities such as Google and Apple, or is it duplicated and sent to yourself and to the larger entity?
Yeah, right now it has to be duplicated because it only has, or it has the same permissions as any other app on your phone. So it can't really preempt any other app. So, you know, any app that you have on your phone can just grab any of this stuff. And for most of it, for the important stuff like location and, or like the well-known stuff like location and health data, like you will be prompted to give permission and you can deny that. So it's not necessary, you have some say in it, but there is stuff that like sensor data that is not privileged, that like I as the developer can just like, you know, grab and do whatever I want, but any app can do that.
Yeah, part of the biggest problem with this data collection is the inability to be able to use apps unless you completely sign and give consent to something or upgrade some particular app. They say, well, do you want to continue using this app? Well, you have to give consent, you know, and it's just kind of strong arming people into giving up their data and being forced to consent.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, even though it is just duplicating data at this time, I think there is a healthy push and pull between centralization and decentralization, you know, and we are the people that are responsible now for pushing against centralization, and nobody else is going to do it but us, you know, as you know, just the average person. So I think this is healthy to do, even though we're not, I guess, 100% intercepting the data. So it is something, it speaks out and it says something. So. Yeah.
Well, this is a really important point that Phil and I have been talking about too, is there's two sides to this, and most people in this space are only concerned with like building the walls higher and like keeping the data in. It's like you can try and like, you know, build up your security and your lack of exposure, and you can try not to use these apps and those apps and just make it harder for anyone to get at like the data that you're generating. But more and more that's going to be like, if you just focus on that, you're still going to get the people who infer that data from everything else around you. It's like you're going to leave like a John-sized hole in the data fabric, even if you're like perfectly off the grid. And so most of that stuff that you would think wouldn't be able to be known will still be able to be known, just like by taking this piece and then inferring the rest of it. And so what really has to happen is, I mean, you do need to build the walls up like high enough. I don't know, there's a threshold, right, where it's just like it's too hard to go that much higher without that much more reward. But then you also need to track you need to like fingerprint your data and track it through the system in some way in order to be able to say, hey, you misused this, you know, you stole this. And there's lots of people working on that. I view Republic as maybe not generating like the primary tech for a lot of these things, but just adopting like the best of breed from like the smart people who are kind of specializing in all these niches, because you have to really bring all that stuff together. and make it usable for people. And that's kind of like what role I think Republic plays, is like I prefer not to reinvent any wheels if possible, but just like, you know, make this really easy to use, make this really easy to use, and give people options.
Keith, I'd say the way I see it also is like, if when you first hear about what's going on with your personal data, you're like most times your first instinct is like, oh, I should live like in the woods and not like share my data anymore. But then so I think privacy is important, but privacy is not the solution to the problem. I think it's actually having control of the data we produce. That's how we're gonna finally get to having actually like having grasping the value and of what's being generated, and like living in a world where our data is like the value of our data is recognized. Because privacy, it is useful. Like you want privacy, but it won't solve the problem.
Yeah, because the privacy, with what we basically have no enforcement right now, and so privacy can give you the false sense that like, oh, nobody knows this about me, when really like it's being traded on like all these gray market auction sites for, you know, just constantly generating value for people. And then you're sitting there thinking that you're like safe, or that you're doing things correctly. And so that's kind of why I did start out in the privacy like forums and communities and stuff. And then when I started like trying to do all that, like self-host my own chats, and like, you know, I just want to be in my house and be able to like unplug this box, and then nobody knows anything about me. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and it turns out you can't really do that. And actually you make yourself even less secure, because now you are in charge of your own like internet security and your connectivity and all this stuff that's really complicated to figure out. You're actually better off like on a hosted service behind like a company that you know, has to put up all these firewalls and do the security correctly and all this stuff. So that's kind of what shifted me over to data ownership and enforcement, because so the theft to me is clear, Phil, like you said, but we don't actually have any leverage here. And maybe Corey, you can speak to this, but in my amateur lawyer thinking or legal thinking, like I feel like we need to have a data market where you can put a price on something, so that you can actually put a number to Google or Facebook or whoever else is using your data, and say that, because like right now somebody is like you know, siphoning off oil from your property or whatever, and then you catch them, there's like a market price for that oil, and you can like sue them for damages, right? Or just like there's some sort of liability there that like has a number. And we just don't have that for data, because like I can't go and sell all the data that these companies are selling, because they aggregate it, they process it into something, into a product. So it's like you know, I have the oil under my house, but I can't process that into gasoline and sell it. But there's still like a wholesale market price for the oil that like it's clear to anybody that, you know, I owned it, it was stolen, it was worth this much, like, you know, legal action can be taken. And I think we're missing that component right now of nobody knows how much this data is worth. It's all very subjective. Nobody has a clear idea. Like regulators don't know. Like some of the companies, like Google probably has the best perspective on like the data industry and the data markets, and maybe some of the buyers do, but even they're missing like a giant piece of it. So I don't know, is that line of reasoning legitimate, Corey, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's I think that when the internet and all our devices and data collection came around, it was very intentionally not in a way that would allow us to treat it like property. And I think that was like I said, intentional, and the providers wanted to keep it that way. And part of what we're trying to do now is get everybody to and reconceptualize the idea about this as property. This is, I mean, to use your analogy, this is oil that's underneath property we own. And it's going to be, it's tough. It's not a switch that's going to happen right away.
Yeah, and I don't think property and ownership is like the final like way to look at this. I just think it's the most expedient way to like get some justice in the space, because it's something that we all viscerally feel, I think, just like as being human, that like when we see this stuff being used in ways that we didn't know about or consent, it feels like something was taken from us. And so I think that's kind of the first thing to talk about. But obviously, you know, data is not it's not like oil, like it doesn't get consumed, like it doesn't it just persists. It's like fungible. It's like it's weird in all sorts of like unique ways. So I don't think, and there's a lot of downsides to like as a society, like saying as a final concept, like data is this commodity that is owned. I don't think that's where we can end up, but I think right now we just need to get people paid for the value that they're contributing to the economy, and like the other people are basically stealing. So it's like, according to these rules, I think it's like theft and we should get people compensated like according to these rules, but like we also need to evolve the rules to actually accommodate what data is in its own kind of unique form.
Keith, would I see there's like 10 minutes left of the call. Would you like to maybe cover the voting app quickly, and then we can get input from everyone on what we should prioritize, or just have their opinion on what we should be focusing on?
Yeah. So the voting app, I'll start by answering your question, Phil, about liquid democracy. So the idea is that most people don't participate in governance and won't want to. And there's a lot of people out there trying to get more people to participate, because you want to express the will of a group of people. And you can't really say that you've expressed the will of the people if only 3% voted and this is how they voted. And so something that Dan exposed to me, like, 15 years ago now, is this idea of delegation, and not just delegation, but delegation by expertise. And so the idea here is that whatever voting power you have in the community, that you can delegate that out to people according to the subject areas that you trust them with. Like I might trust Corey, like if we're trying to make a decision, it has to do about the law or something legal, then I would want Corey to vote for me if I can't vote. Right. And then if something had to do with governance but I can't vote, I want Dan to vote for me, because I think he knows a lot about governance, or he shares my views, or whatever. But right now we just have a situation where there is kind of like one-to-one delegation in a lot of places. But that's just like, okay, Corey, no matter what it is, like, you vote for me. And like, hopefully we have 100% overlap on how we view everything. It's like, it's very low resolution. And so how this actually plays out in the voting app is through a release of tokens every month, or however long we want to set it up for, but let's say 1,000 tokens every month. And so once a month, those 1,000 tokens are made, and then we all need to decide like what percentage everybody gets of that 1,000 tokens. So let's just draw a circle around that, because that is a complicated thing, but let's say we come up with a fair way for where everybody feels good about like their percentage that they're allocated of the tokens. So then that phase ends. So it's like minted tokens, decide the percentages for everybody. And then there's the claiming period where you go and claim your tokens from the app. And so the app will know, you know, your percentage versus like how much was made, and it'll present you with a number, like say like 300 tokens. But in order for you to get those, and those are your voting power. So like when you vote on something, then you would have 300 tokens, a 300 number, like voting power towards this thing. However you vote, you have to, before you can get that though, you have to delegate it to somebody else, because we're assuming that you're probably never going, or like it's rare that you're like in that 3% or whatever the percentage is that are actively going to be paying attention to everything. And so as long as you give those to somebody else to vote in your absence, then you can get your tokens. And then once you do that, then you have the power. But even if you never vote on anything ever again, that initial delegation was that was kind of like the extent of your will being put into the system that is then reflected. And so, and delegations can actually kind of move on to the next person. So say I delegate to Corey, but then he doesn't show up either. And then, but then he delegated to Dan, and then Dan votes. Now Dan has the power of me and Corey and his own stuff, plus whatever else was delegated to Dan. So you kind of, at the end of the day, you get this representative democracy type scheme where your delegates are kind of like your representatives, but instead of having to wait for all these election cycles, yeah, so, oh, sorry, I'm just seeing these. So in this scheme, it's not one person, one vote. So everyone's going to have voting power proportional to, well, we're going to try and make it proportional to like the effort or work that you do for the DAO, right? Which is pretty subjective. So and we'll table like actually, but let's just say that, you know, you do this amount of work and then you get 300 tokens because you want to align the voting power with the people who are like closest to the work. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of orgs right now, is the people who make decisions are not actually doing the work, and they don't really have accountability because of that. And so you want to connect the decision to like the experts and the stakeholders. Dan, did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say, yeah, you can separate those stages. You know, you can consider liquid democracy in its base case as the one person, one vote, and then you delegate across to the people you trust, and then those votes it builds a network, and those votes can transfer across the network. But then, yeah, you're adding this layer of giving, rewarding the kind of the starting vote power based on effort, or depending on the community, you know, a community might decide, well, in our community, it's one person, one vote. So we'll allocate things evenly. But another community might have a different set of agreements or rules about how they want to do it.
Yeah. And the app as it is configured that way, where you could do it where everybody has an equal vote. we're running out of time. I can go over, but let's open it up here for anyone. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask before they have to go, or anything that wasn't covered. Otherwise, I can talk a little bit more about the subsequent voting app stuff. So yeah, you gotta go. Okay. So how that works is people can make proposals, and then that will kind of, you'll actually do the voting in the app. And the app will kind of read your token count. And so JournoDAO and FactLand and us are all using it as like a pilot for now. And so I think JournoDAO has the most varied members and proposals on the way. So that's kind of where like the frontline action is. But I'm hoping that I think Phil and I have talked about a few things that could be adjudicated with this with the app, so we can test things out.
Keith, I guess something that would be interesting also to cover is like maybe like roadmap, like what you have in mind for, I don't know, like next month or next month's year.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few just bugs and features that I think are like relatively straightforward that people have been asking for that need to get out in the mobile app. But then I'd like to move on to, you know, redoing the website to focus on more aligned communities, like environmental communities and like decentralized science. And then there's a desktop app that I want to get out before the end of the year that will, many people have many different devices, like either multiple phones or whatever. And so the desktop app will be like a way for you to like see all of the data coming off of all your devices eventually. And then I need to get all the code actually out and open sourced, and I'm inviting people to the repo now as they ask for it, but I need to clean it up and then push it out so we can actually point people at it and it can be audited and inspected and all that.
For those who might listen to the recording, I see you wrote, "What can you do to help?" I think did you write that, Keith, on the document?
Yeah, I just wanted that as a reminder to the thing we're asking people to do right now is to just subscribe to the blog. We're going to do weekly updates there that'll go out as a newsletter and a blog post. And so I think joining Discord means like you have to take on a new app and do all this stuff, where I think just signing up with email on the blog is like a pretty good thing that most people can do. And then anything significant that happens within the DAO will go out as an update there. And then, yeah, if you want to go beyond that, then you should just talk to us about, you know, follow us on Twitter, tweet at us, and get in the Discord and reach out. I think we're both pretty accessible. Eric, are you still there?
I am.
Anything that I left out, or do you want to give a plug for JournoDAO too, or any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've been testing the voting app in JournoDAO, like you were saying, and I think conceptually it makes a lot of sense, and we're at the point of like just kind of working through the social dynamics of basically assigning a value to people's contributions, which is kind of tricky in DAOs.
Yeah, it's tricky in traditional orgs too. It's like I don't think it's ever been done properly or to anyone's satisfaction. Like, unless you're the one getting overpaid at like an organization, then you're probably upset. Yeah, hopefully it's a little different with just like straight voting rights and there's no actual like financial compensation tied to it at this point. So new set of dynamics. But I'm tired of listening to me. I appreciate you all like sitting through it. Hopefully somebody more dynamic can take the lead on these at some point. So if you're listening to this and you want a future in broadcasting and you liked what I said today, then position is open.
And I guess Keith, today was like a good update just to put everyone on the same level. In the future, it would be nice to get everyone more involved in the and make this more of a group conversation. But I think it's a good start. I'm excited to have those calls on a regular basis. I'm glad to see we have a nice community. And Eric, I'm also glad you're here. I got to join the spaces yesterday, Twitter space of Journal DAO. I liked what you were saying. I personally think that focusing on local communities is a big part of the solution, basically for different problems we're facing as a society, like journalism. Same for data. Same for like politics. Local communities is, in my opinion, the key to success. Focusing on those.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. Obviously, you heard what I said yesterday, so I won't repeat myself. But it's kind of, I mean, I kind of always thought that, like, and I've lived in small towns my whole life, kind of for that reason, and it's been kind of crazy just to see the way that like the sense of community, I mean, really broadly, it's kind of been hollowed out, and so now everyone, particularly since the pandemic, now everyone's like trying to find that again, like online, it feels like, and it's all kind of the same thing, but it would be great to get it more now that we've kind of figured out the community is important digitally and virtually. Maybe we can remind people IRL and try to rebuild that.
Here.
Yeah, totally agree with you. That's a concept. I kind of just quickly, I think like during COVID, I was just reading a lot. Like I'm like, oh, we're facing like so many social problems. I had like more time to read, so I read tons of stuff. And I was reading like anarchist stuff on anarchism, and one of the big components I liked about anarchism was the emphasis on local communities. I didn't agree with everything, but I thought that point was I don't know, this is just something good that we should keep on putting forward.
And in some ways, you could view the Web3 movement as bringing the fun parts of scale to the local communities, right? Like we got tempted away from the local stuff because there's so much interesting new things to be had, like at a global and large scale with like social networks and all this stuff. But now we get to bring that stuff that kind of led us astray back to local communities and still have like the fun of Facebook, but just like with 100 people that you actually like and care about without opting into surveillance and all this BS.
It's been kind of just one quick anecdote more because I'm doing this tonight. It's been really kind of fascinating with the pandemic. Where I live is, it's kind of a tourist place, and there's a lot of like outdoor activities. So like during COVID, like tons of people have moved here. Anyone, like people that can telecommute, like us mostly, like a whole just couple thousand people, have moved here. And they move here and they're like, oh, who am I going to hang out with? And so like I lead these mountain biking rides every now and then. And so I'm doing one tonight, and I'm anticipating like basically people who probably spend most of their days doing this, like coming out tonight to get like some like, you know, face-to-face contact. It's been an interesting phenomenon over the last 2 years to see that happen.
That's really cool. I want to go, except for the mountain biking thing.
You
I want to go to the mountain biking thing.
Yeah.
You can be the medic.
And Keith, I think your mom said something important. We need more women, but we need more women in this group. But that's also an issue I noticed with data. Like all the data like organization orgs, they're all like a bunch of men basically.
Mm-hmm.
Need more diversity.
Yeah, some of I found some really cool people on Twitter, and a lot of them were women, but they were all too busy kind of to get involved. But
High demand.
But yeah, eventually try and get my wife in here. She was helping with Republic in the early days. Well, all right. Should we say
Yeah.
ta-ta? And then same time next week.
Same time next week. Thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks, Keith.
Good to meet y'all.
Thanks, Phil.
Good to meet your mom, Keith. Did you say that was your brother-in-law?
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Yeah, this was the best town hall ever.
Yeah, right. All right. We'll see you later.